Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming back after the AGM. Welcome to this, the presidential address. I still haven't quite got used to saying those things, but anyway, here we go. It's over 28 years since a young postgrad student went to a phone box near the Computing Science Department of Glasgow University to phone the work colleague of the father of a friend to talk about what it's like to be an actuary. This young man had thought about being an actuary before. He'd in fact been offered a job more or less by Douglas McKinnon, the then General Manager of Scottish Mutual Assurance Society. But he decided to stay on and finish his PhD. So now that the thesis was nearly finished, his thoughts were turning to the future. And dare I say it, he was swithering between becoming an accountant or becoming an actuary. So he phoned a friend, or the father of a friend, and was given this name, and he phoned this person in London. Now, I'm afraid I can't remember the name of the man that I spoke to. He had something to do with Sun Life Unit Trust, so if that was you, please get in touch. I owe you a coffee, at the very least. And I can't remember what the man said except one thing, and that was, "I love my job." And that was what clinched it for me. To hear a businessman speaking with passion about what he did was the thing that made me think, I want to become an actuary. So a couple of months later, I enrolled at Hare in the first running of the postgrad diploma course, and a year later, ended up on the 4th of August, 1986, starting off work with Scottish Mutual Assurance. Little knowing that in 25 years from then, or something like that, a little bit more than that, I'd be standing up here as the president of my profession. And one of the great things, I think, about being an actuary is that what that man said to me on the phone is something that most of us here could say, that we actually love being actuaries. I think we all have bad days in the office and have days when we think life should not be like this, or our families think life should not be like this. But in general, I think we get great satisfaction, whether it be from the variety of what we do, the problem-solving challenges, the technical complexity that we grapple with, or perhaps it's the public policy implications that so thrill us. But whatever we do, I think we're fortunate that we can say we love our jobs. Whether I'm going to love being president for the next year, I don't know. I'll certainly give it my best shot. And thanks again to you and to Council in particular for giving me this privilege. Over the last 30 years, a lot has changed. When we were thinking of just some of the things to highlight, we kind of thought, well, the Big Bang happened as I was studying my investment exams. We then had the launch of the euro. I'm not quite sure how many credit crises. We've had several of them. I don't know how many stock market crashes I've lived through, but quite a few. So there have been a number of things that have happened in the world of the world of economics. And then, of course, on the world scene, we've seen the rise of the East and the phenomenal growth rates in China and other countries and the implications they have for us in Europe and in the West. Within financial services, we've seen lots of changes as well. I joined a firm that had just launched unit-linked products in 1985. They were very proud of their launch. So unit-linking had started to take a hold in the UK in insurance and savings markets. Then, of course, we had pension simplification and the rise of the personal pension, and then the rise of the mis-selling scandal. Then we had the shift to low inflation and the implications that had for mortgage endowments and the implications for the insurance industry in the eyes of many of its savers. And then, of course, sadly, we had equitable life, words that still, I think, hang over us to some extent, but I think we've done a lot of work to learn from and move on from. And then within the institute and faculty itself, well, obviously, we're now talking about the institute and faculty. When I first joined, it was the faculty, or it was the institute, and almost neither of the twain should meet. And then I remember the first time we had a joint council meeting, I think it was in York, and how significant that was. And then, of course, things moved on. And in 2010, we merged the two bodies. Of course, I've just realized I should have mentioned the FRC, but that was one of the big things that, the equitable life spillover, the Morris Review, and then the requirement to have oversight of us as a professional body, the rise of the Board of Actuarial Standards, now to be replaced, of course, by the Actuarial Council of the FRC following their restructuring last year. But there's been a lot of change in our economy, a lot of change in our industry, and a lot of change in our profession. And one of the things that we need to keep doing, of course, is to respond to the change and be conscious of what that means for us as an organisation and as actuaries. One of the things that came very soon after the merger in 2010 was a development of a new strategy to follow on from this, the mission. And what I find is when I go around speaking to people, as I have to do as the president-elect, what you find is that not everybody is aware, actually, of the mission and the vision of the organisation, and not many people are aware of the strategy that we follow. So I thought it might be quite helpful to start off, as this is being videoed, and people are going to get CPD for watching it at home. So, and I presume it will be on after the 30th of June, so it'll help you for next year's CPD requirements. I thought it'd be quite helpful for us just to look and see what are we here for, and how is that reflected in what we do. So here's the mission of the profession, and it's interesting, it has what you'd expect. We're here to regulate actuaries, and that's first and foremost what the professional body is here to do, to make sure that those of us who are members do the right thing and have the right standards. And we do that in conjunction with the FRC, but we set a lot of the professional standards ourselves. So we regulate, but we also promote. I think some of our members expect us to be a sort of a lobby force for actuarial roles and the importance of actuarial thought and thinking, and that is something that we do, and I'll touch on later on. But the thing I really wanted to highlight here is the first bit, and that is, in the public interest, to advance all matters relevant to actuarial science. So one of the things about the Institute and faculty is we are here for more than just our members. At the merger, in the mission and vision that we adopted and voted for as members in that election, in that vote, we've chosen to give ourselves a duty to serve the public interest and to advance actuarial science. So there's something bigger than just us as actuaries going on within the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries. And here's a survey of what our strategy is. We have a five-fingered strategy, I was going to say. There's 5 aspects to it. And when we were putting this slide together, these were the obvious photos to use, but all 5 photos are equally inappropriate because they're all inadequate to describe what we actually do. But first and foremost in our strategy is education, ensuring that the criticisms that Morris had of our syllabus can't be held against us again. Making sure that the syllabus moves with the times, that it builds on the research that is done, that meets the challenges of the marketplace as it evolves. So there's a lot of work done on the education syllabus, which you don't see in the picture. But it's how you deliver it, which is also important. And the delivery of education is far more than just students sitting in a room, because we actually have students in a huge number of countries throughout the world. We examine, I think we've got examination centres in over 100 different centres outside the UK. I think it was 127 at the last sitting. 10 of those are in the UK, and the rest of them are outside the UK. So how you educate those people, how you help them to learn, is a big challenge. And so our education strategy involves role play for students to learn softer skills, involves presentation, it involves a business game and commercial awareness, it involves various internet-based approaches as well as face-to-face teaching. We also, in the education, have to recognize that if you're examining, it's something like 12,000 papers at the last sitting of the exams. So there's even more papers than that. Just the logistics of dealing with that is phenomenal. And we're examining in countries where, you kind of, every now and again, I remember in the education board, there'd be a monkey had got into the exam centre somewhere and disrupted attention for some of the students. We don't hear that so often, but we do end up with exam papers being hijacked in mail vans. How do you deal with that? We end up losing scripts from time to time. And how do you minimise that? The PR damage or threat of that is quite considerable. So a lot of work is done behind the scenes to computerise that, to scan in the papers so that stuff can be marked simultaneously by first and second markers. Huge sophisticated team behind the scenes to deliver the exams that we used to sit in. And all we saw was the exam paper in the exam hall. There's a lot more to education than that. Next thing is member support. And again, a very inappropriate photo, because if all our member support consisted of would be just meetings in this room, then we'd be failing most of our members. More than 40% of our members are outside the UK, and a large part of them aren't within easy travelling distance to London for an evening meeting. That's why this is videoed, and all sessional meetings are now videoed so that they can be made available to our members throughout the world. I'll talk a little bit more about member support, since I'm particularly enthusiastic about what Memoria and her team do, so more of that later. Regulation, yeah, that we do have rules and regulations to meet. We've also got professionalism standards, and how to make those live in the lives of actuaries is something that we have a team of people who work on as well. So under the leadership of Ben Kemp, our General Counsel, and the chair, the lay chair of our Professional Regulation Committee, Sir Philip Moore, they've been leading a really important transformation in the professionalism training that we have available. And those of you who are members, you'll have had an email just recently about the experienced actuary professionalism training that comes live in a couple of weeks' time. And that will be the next iteration of training us in professional standards in the modern world. Public affairs is very much more than just grabbing newspaper headlines. In fact, we're not trying to grab newspaper headlines. We're trying to influence, because of the issues that the world faces, that we as actuaries can help inform. And I'll talk more about that later on too. And then finally, we've got research and the learned society aspect. And what's very, very important is to build on the legacy of the past and all the experience that our forerunners have chronicled for us, and the research that's currently done today. We want to keep building on that and have a really vibrant research community. We've over 700 people involved in research amongst our members, and that's really exciting for all that brings and how it educates how we think as actuaries. But it's not just the quantitative stuff that we have people researching. We do research into qualitative issues as well, customer behaviour, how best to market to them, how best to inform them in communication and education. So there's lots goes on research as well. We also, Philip mentioned the ARC, the Actual Research Centre in Edinburgh, that got kicked off last year. Another important development where the profession is sponsoring PhD students 2 a year to research subjects particularly relevant to the insurance industry. So those are the 5 prongs of the Institute and Faculty strategy, and you'll have noticed that there's nothing about international there. And the reason why is over 40% of our members are based outside the UK. So with an international organisation, everything we do has to be international if we're going to have equivalence of experience for our members wherever they are. And so everything that's done by the Institute and Faculty is done thinking about how will this work overseas as well, how will it work in the UK? And of course the internet is a key tool for that. That's going to be my theme for my presidency. It's interesting, I stand here as the 4th president of the Institute and Faculty. I'm the 2nd from the faculty, which is nice. Interestingly, I'm the 3rd Scot. You might need to think about that. But anyway, and of course, each president gets their chance to put their emphasis on the strategy. When I was younger, I would have come to an event like this to find out what the strategy was. And it was very much in the president's gift, or so it seemed, to decide what the professional body was going to be doing for the next 2 years. But we're too large a body now to be able to do that. We have a turnover of about 30 million, as you'll see in the accounts, if you include the CMI. We've got a staff of over 100 people. We're a big organisation, and you can't just change that every year depending on what the president wants to do. So the role of the president has changed from one, if you like, sort of setting a lot of things to being a proactive ambassador to what council has set. And the governance of the professional body is really important to us, that we are, having a broad base bringing to bear on the decisions of what the body is trying to do and our priorities. So our governance has the council setting strategy, and the president, obviously a member of that, can influence that. But the president then doesn't make up policy on the hoof. What the president is there to do is to be a proactive ambassador for what the members are wanting to do through council. So Ronnie, the 1st president of the Institute and Faculty, his priority was change. He was our change champion, if you like. He led the merger of the two bodies and then led the project to start transforming the executive, the infrastructure of the body. He handed on to our First Lady President, please, Jane's in the front row here. Jane's priorities were regulation and really improving the links that we have with regulators in the FRC and building us to a very strong position where we have good relationships with the FRC. We have a number of people on government working parties on pensions, and that's largely thanks to Jane and her gracious way of dealing with people. Jane's successor, Philip, his priority, as we heard earlier, was brand and leadership. And he has championed the need to recognise that it's not just the visual identity that's important, though we have a very, very nice visual identity now, but it's actually having values for the organisation and a mission that we know what we're about and we can all get behind that and pull together. So Philip's legacy is of leadership and of brand values and a brand promise. So what I would like to then do is to build on that very firm foundation that's been laid and actually start to improve the extent to which we influence what's happening outside. When you think of the number of issues that are facing both our society and the societies in which so many of our members work, there's a lot of similarities. Everybody's got pensions issues. How are we going to fund retirement? When you get to China, you discover that their support ratio is something like 6 to 1, and they're worried as it's going to fall. In Britain, if we had a dependency ratio of 6 to 1, we'd be thrilled. But we've all got similar issues of how do you fund retirement for your population. Then other issues about how do you, and of course with pensions, you've got healthcare issues. How do you fund that? How do you get something sustainable for society going forward? Then you've got the issue of insurance solvency. What's adequate protection for customers? What are the implications of too large capital requirements? What are the implications of too small ones? Issues of solvency. When I've been touring in other parts of the world on your behalf, you know, the industries and regulators there are talking of exactly the same issues that we're talking about in Solvency II and in the UK. So these are important issues. So there are a number of issues where the skills of actuaries are very important to the public debate, and we've got a lot to contribute, but we'll only contribute if people think that we're relevant. And in a recent survey that we did, there were some very positive things said about us by some people, but in others, some of the key opinion formers, people like MPs, 70% of MPs had never heard of the Institute and faculty. About 50% of MPs had heard about actuaries and thought they were clever people, but hard to understand. If you look at journalists, what you find is some journalists are aware of us, but other journalists think that we're just too complicated and difficult to deal with. And so that's the background against which we're trying to influence public policy. And again, we've given ourselves this obligation through our mission to advance all matters relevant to actuarial science in the public interest. So we need to do something about our relevance and how we're perceived as being relevant by the world outside. But I think we're not going to achieve that unless we continue to be relevant to each other and have members really engaged with their professional body. We depend upon our volunteers. We've actually got 2,700 people, active volunteers for the profession, which is a phenomenal percentage of our membership. But we still need to do more than that because of the opportunities that are available to us. But I think the sad thing is that until we have more members actually aware of what their professional body is trying to do, I don't see that we're going to take advantage of the opportunities that we have before us. So the first thing I would like to talk about is just our professional body and what it's trying to do for us. And I thought I'd start off with the staff. And here's a photo of Derek Cribb. Some of you will know him. He's sitting in the front row, looking very embarrassed. But there's Derek, our chief executive. Derek joined the profession as a consultant, a change consultant in 2010. And within a few months, he'd been appointed acting chief executive. And then in 2011, after the strategy was finished, he was asked to become the permanent, well, or as permanent as any job this is these days, but that's not a threat, Derek. But we do keep our staff to account, you'll be glad to know. That's one of the roles of management board and the presidential team. But yes, we were very fortunate in having Derek. Derek's got a long experience of change management within financial services, both insurance and in banking. And Derek has put together a really first-class team of directors who lead the different parts of our work. Memoria Lewis heads up member support. Memoria joined us last year She joined us before, again, as a consultant, and then became a permanent member of staff last year. And Memoria comes with over 20 years of international business consultancy, particularly in change management and business transformation. And Memoria leads the member support area. They are the people who put on events like this. They are the people who oversee the website design and the delivery of CPD and all the other training material that we get. They are the people who think about community within the profession. They set up member interest groups in different parts of the world and try and do what they can to give us a world-class member experience. Trevor joined the profession in 2005 after a distinguished career in higher education, and he leads our education and examination work. We've talked a bit about the exam centres that we run. It's a massive organisation in terms of logistics, as well as, of course, ensuring that the syllabus keeps up to date, and also ensuring that we form links with appropriate universities throughout the world. And one of the things that we're particularly pleased about is that 17 of the top universities in the world that teach actuarial science are affiliated with us, and they have accreditation agreements with us so that when students sit their exams are of a quality that they can automatically get exemptions from our exams if they've passed the university exams to a sufficiently high standard. Paul Reynolds joined us last year, around about the same time as I joined the presidential team. Paul is Director of Public Affairs. He comes from the Pension Protection Fund, where he led all the strategic comms for that, the public affairs, the internal communications as well. He calls himself a Sir Humphrey. He's a career civil servant. He's been a private secretary to one of the ministers in the Department of, Pensions. And so that's Paul, and he leads our public affairs. He's also responsible for research and all the consultation work that we do and the stakeholder engagement with government and regulators. Then we've got Anne Moore, the Director of Finance and Operations. She joined us in 2011 from over 20 years in the public sector in a number of senior finance roles. And she runs not just finance, but all the infrastructure of the profession, HR, the IT delivery, property. That's a big issue just now as we move to new premises. We'll still be in the hall, you'll be glad to know, but we're looking for better offices near here that will better serve a growing professional body and all the demands that we have. That's Anne. And then last but by no means least, Ben Kemp, our General Counsel. Ben joined us again last year to be the General Counsel and head of our professional regulation area. Ben was a partner in a London law firm and had been our lawyer, actually. He'd worked with us, and he had such a high regard he wanted to join us as well, so that was nice. So there's our top team, but in fact, there's 122 people. There they all are. I was going to single out Dan Watts, who's the man that supports the presidential team and does a sterling job keeping us on the straight and narrow, but he didn't want me to. But he is in there, but I won't tell you where he is. Also there is Wen Lee. I'd like to say hello to Wen, who'll be watching this on video. Wen is our member of staff based in Hong Kong. She actually lives in Beijing, but she's employed through Hong Kong for a variety of reasons. And Wen does a lot of great work raising our profile in China amongst our members and the different universities that we're affiliated with there. So there's the team that work with us. And it's interesting, but there are some people there who are even more enthusiastic about actuarial work than I am, and you are too. And it's great to have such a strong team working with us to try and advance the aims of the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries. It's probably invidious to highlight one particular area, but I'm going to do that. That's member support, since it's the one that really excites me, and it's actually largely because of their enthusiasm that I was willing to let my name go forward to become president. Because those of you who are active volunteers will know it does actually feel different now, being in the Institute and Faculty, to what it felt like at some points in the past. We really have a buzz about the organisation, and that's largely down to the leadership that comes from the top, but the quality of the people and what they're trying to do for us. So here's what member support is trying to do. It covers CPD that's going to be relevant to us. So there's a lot of work done on the conference programs and the other events that go on. But then there's also thinking about how to make that easily accessible for us. So a lot more is on the web than used to be. And once we've finished building the virtual learning environment that's currently under construction, there'll be even more available to us. So expect great things from these people, because that's what they want to deliver for you. There's also a lot of work has been done on the volunteering experience. And that's what's going to bring me on to, I'm going to cover that in a second or two. But just before I finish this first phase, which is about, the professional body and what it's doing to serve the members, one of the things that I really want to champion here is the relationship between the staff and the members. I've heard it said that the staff are not part of the Institute and faculty because that's the actuaries. And I don't buy that at all. I think the days of volunteers just running our professional body have to be over because, there's just too much going on in busy business lives for us to do all the infrastructure. And in fact, in many ways, we're not that good at it. Why not actually get professionals in who can really do the job better than we can? And that's what we've got in our staff and the Institute and faculty. So one of the things I want to champion is the teamwork between the volunteers and the members and the staff. We're a member organisation. That's different to a PLC or a business organisation. So we probably still need to work out what's the best way of engaging members as you develop their membership body. But I think we've done very well over the last year, particularly, and it's such a thrill to be part of this change. One of the other things that I want to champion this year is how we really ensure that we deliver a member experience to the 40% outside the UK as well as the 60% in the UK. Because if we get that right, then we're delivering a better member experience to the people in Edinburgh, a city that I know and love, but also people in Glasgow, people in Manchester, people in York, people in Bristol. We have members throughout Britain who don't come to London-based events all the time. So actually, if we're delivering stuff to Beijing, we're actually delivering it to Birmingham, and so on. So that's an important element that you'll be hearing more of, because we have people who lead member groups in different parts of the world, and we're thinking how best to engage with them and cross-fertilise ideas for the good of all our members. So we've got the relevance of the professional body to the members, but what about the relevance of the members, and in particular the volunteers, to the professional body? We've got, as I say, 2,700. Those of you who are really numerate will like to know it's actually 2,696. And of course, I asked the obvious question, because under TAS D, and I see Paul Kennedy of the FRC is here, which is nice, but under TAS D, we need to analyse the data that we're given and check that it's fit for purpose, so I did that. And I wanted to know, had we eliminated duplications from that? And yes, we had, to the best of our ability. So that means there's an awfully large percentage of our membership volunteering, and that is fantastic. But I still think we need to have more. But here are 30 of the volunteers, or as many of the 30 that were at the last council meeting. That's your council. And of course, council's job is to sort of oversee the development and the implementation of the strategy. A lot of that is delegated down to the management board and the risk and audit committee. But council are the people who hold the strategy of the profession, and they take that responsibility very seriously. So that's council standing just round the back a couple of weeks ago. But we need an awful lot more than just the council, and I'd just like to highlight 6 more of the key volunteers. Some of them are here. Hope you won't mind me embarrassing you. But within the professional body, we have these what we call practice executive committees. Those of you who are long in the tooth will know them as the Life Board and the Pensions Board, and in fact, those of us who move with the times will know them as the Life Board and the Pensions Board in a couple of weeks' time, because we're actually going to go back to those names by public demand. But they're called the PECs just now, so I'll call them that. And here are the guys that lead, or the actuaries that lead our practice executive committees. And this is really, I think, if you like, the engine room of the work of the profession amongst the members. So each of these people, they lead the area, the committee for a particular area. If you can't see, it's small writing, I'm sure, at the back, but you've got Chris Watts, who leads Finance and Investment PEC. You've got Jules Constantinou, who leads the ERM, Enterprise Risk Management PEC. Sue Elliott leads the Health and Care PEC. Alistair Clarkson, one of my ex-colleagues from a previous role, he leads the Life PEC. We've got Duncan Anderson leading the General Insurance PEC, and Jim Boyle leading the Pensions PEC. And one of the things that's been done over the last year under the support, it's been a project of Memoria Lewis and member support, is to make sure that we're really clear about what PECs are there for. And the role of these committees has changed over time with different sort of emphases of strategies for the profession. But I think where we are now is in a very good place, where the different PECs have consistent terms of reference of what they're trying to do. And what they're doing within each of their subject areas is to really champion the emerging issues to make sure that the profession is keeping up to date and equipping our members to give high quality actuarial work in whatever area they happen to work in. So they do all the usual stuff like CPD and events. They oversee the research that needs to be done. They look at the regulatory activity that is relevant to that area. They get first shot at doing all the consultation responses and things that come in to do with their area. In fact, Jim Boyle was just telling me he's off to Europe tomorrow to speak to an MEP about employer covenant research that was sponsored by the profession. And that's the sort of access that we're very pleased to get because, as our mission says, we're seeking to advance actuarial science in the public interest, and Europe is a very important area for us. So those are the people who run committees. Each one has got supported by a committee of volunteers, and in almost all cases there are a number of subcommittees of volunteers working hard to push forward the agenda of the Institute and faculty in that subject area. There's over 400 people on these committees. There's another 400 people in the 400 Club, which is a sounding board for the Institute and faculty to bounce ideas off to get member views. There's also 59 people on the waiting list for that. So if you'd like to be part of that, I'm afraid you'll have to join the queue. But again, it's really helpful, and we use that at council to get a sense of what the public, what our members are feeling. We've got over 300 people who are active speakers for us at conferences. We've got over 100 people who are careers ambassadors, and the list goes on. But 2,700 volunteers. But actually, we want to have more. So one of the things that Memoria has introduced is the membership engagement program. So we have our manager, I think Debbie's sitting up at the back. I keep mentioning her and she gets embarrassed, but Debbie is even more enthusiastic about actual work than me, and almost as enthusiastic as Memoria, hard though that would be. And what Debbie has done is put in place an infrastructure that gives access to everybody to volunteering opportunities. I first became a volunteer, I think around about 1988, because somebody in Scottish Mutual wanted off a committee, and the easiest way to get off a committee was to offer a name to go on it instead. And that's how I became a volunteer. But maybe we need a better system when we're such a large organisation, and that's what's been put in place. So all volunteer opportunities are advertised on the web so that anybody can apply. We actually ask people to put together a role profile, for, a sort of an application on why they fit the role that they're applying for. So there's clarity over what's being expected, and also an awareness of what this person's going to bring. And that's working very well. We've got a much broader base of volunteers than we had in the past. Where the next iteration of that is probably going to go is we're developing a volunteer manual that will go on the website soon. And one of the things that we're toying with there is, yes, it's good to be clear about what somebody is signing up for. But to what extent should a volunteer then be accountable for delivering that? I think we've all been at meetings where not everybody had read the papers, so wasn't able to contribute. Some of us have been in working parties where not everybody did what they were meant to be doing. And you see, if volunteers are so important, which they are to the Institute and faculty, then actually volunteers delivering on what they volunteered for must be really important too. But of course you've got to get a balance, because people aren't trying to do a bad job as a volunteer. So we're searching on what's the balance of accountability so that we can hold each other to account for what we do for the Institute and faculty. And as a first step in that, the management board, which is the presidential team, a number of senior executive posts, and a number of members of council that meets to oversee the implementation of council strategy. From this season, management board are going to have one-to-one performance reviews from the chair of the committee. We have an actuary, that takes that role. Alan Whalley is about to take up that role, following the sterling work that his predecessor did, Alan Phillips. And one of the new innovations that we decided just last week was that we should get Alan to do performance reviews of all the people, that includes the president, of their role of management board. And I think that's a good first step to making, demonstrating good governance, that that volunteers can be relied upon to deliver for the Institute and faculty. The particular thing that I want to do here, apart from just generally championing the role of volunteers and encouraging people and making them feel appreciated, is it's in response to a comment that was made to me in China. In China, what you find, quite a number of our fellows there have very senior posts in insurance companies, or chief actuary posts, and they typically are moving into those posts much earlier in their careers than you would do, say, in the UK. And so one of the questions then is, what support can we give our colleagues when they have really difficult challenges? Because it could be quite lonely to be the chief actuary of a life office. So one of the things that we're going to be setting up is an international mentor network, particularly aimed at people in senior positions of responsibility in their companies, particularly in China and Southeast Asia, because that's where the request came from. But I dare say it will apply further afield, because we've got some very experienced actuaries in the UK who have been there, done that, lived through it, and I'm sure they'd be very pleased to share their experience and be a shoulder to bounce ideas off for people in other parts of the world. So look out for that on the volunteer network, because that will be something that we'll advertise, and if you've got experience and you'd like to help out colleagues, younger colleagues in China and Southeast Asia, please sign up. So I've talked about the relevance of the professional body to the members. I've talked about the relevance of volunteers to the professional body. The other aspect on volunteering I just wanted to mention was the importance of having a united position on things. One of the stories that it's quite sad that you hear is when Derek first got involved in the profession, he went along to the then FSA for a meeting, and he was warmly thanked for the recent consultation responses. And he said, responses plural? And he said, yes. The Institute, well, it wasn't the Institute and faculty, I think, or was it in those days? Maybe not quite, but the actuarial profession, as we call ourselves, had submitted 3 responses to an FSA consultation from 3 different areas of the profession, and they were not mutually consistent. I think contradictory is probably the word I was looking for, but it feels a bit hard, but I think that's what they were. And the FSA gentleman said to Derek, I did you a favour, I filed all 3 at the bottom of the pile. That's not really ramping up our relevance. Now, we work much harder at that now in terms of having consistent responses. And at this point, I would just like to say a word of thanks to colleagues on the non-life side and the life side. Because one of the big issues we've got just now is the role of the actuarial function holder under Solvency II. Now, of course, in non-life, we don't have that role in life offices, in non-life offices, whereas in life offices, we have a bigger role. So you have the life guys thinking they're losing something, and you have the non-life guys thinking they're getting something that they were doing okay without. So how do you find a common position between the two of those? And what that needs is willingness to compromise and talk and explore issues. And that's what the life and the non-life PECs have been doing together for a number of months now. And it's come together in a wonderful common statement. We've got a next meeting on Wednesday just to finalise stuff. But it's an example of just the profession working really well together, where folk with common interest but very different experiences come together to find something that works in the public interest as a common position from the profession. And that's something that we'll be looking to do more and more of as occasions come along. So, public affairs, the relevance of us to the world. And when you think, we've talked a lot about the issues that we face already in the world. And so what we actually need to do is we need to have a sort of a professional way of doing this. It's interesting, one of the people here tonight was the volunteer who did the public affairs work for the faculty in the past. And when we were smaller organisations, maybe we could do that through volunteers. But now, because of the size of our organisation, we have to have a professional team that does that. So we have Paul Reynolds and a team of PR professionals and media experts, but also a team of policy managers, actuaries who are employed to facilitate the development of material through the volunteers so that we can inform public debate with. And when you have experts who know how to place this in the press, then you can actually have great coverage. And this is just some of the headlines that we've had over the last year from work that has been done within the profession. Now, the Sun may not be our journal of choice, but we did end up in the Sun several days in a row. We've been in a lot of different newspapers. But in fact, that's again really an inadequate picture of public affairs. It is great to be in the press. The bit you can't see, the black and white picture in the far right-hand corner of Derek, and if you can't read that, don't worry, because it's in Chinese and you probably couldn't. But in a recent visit to China, we were interviewed by a number of different journalists, and that was a profile that Derek did on issues for the Institute and faculty. But that's not what we're trying to do. We're not chasing headlines at all. Rather, what we're doing is seeking to influence these people. Now, there are all the different bodies that we have relationships with just now, whether we've submitted consultation responses to them, or we're on working parties with, or we've got regular consultation meetings with them. And when you look at that, it fills me with pride to think that I'm part of an actuarial body that has got that amount of access to decision makers and other opinion influencers. So we need to work hard to make the most of that. And the way we do that is through our volunteers and all the research that they do. So we're saying we've got 700 members who are involved in research. So what we try and do is find channels for the member-led research that the PECs have identified that we need to do. But sometimes we also have issues which have come from us from outside, maybe requests from regulators or other stakeholders looking for help on specific topics. So we would then set up working parties to address that. The issue that Jim is going to Europe on tomorrow was a good case in point, where quantifying the employer covenant is such a key issue in pensions. So we sponsored research on that and had a competitive tender, and various firms did work for us that we were able to use in influencing and helping opinion formers to be well informed in their debate. So we have strategic research that we fund centrally, but then a lot of it is done by the members research groups, but also done through consultation response groups. And I'm saying each of the PECs has got a group that will work on that with the appropriate policy manager. So ramping up our relevance externally, we're very well placed to do that. It's, as if you like, steady as she goes. But the other thing that we need to talk about is the relevance of our skill set to employers. This is a slide that I used in a conference in Cancun. No, not Cancun, I beg your pardon, Macau. I keep getting those two places mixed up, even though they're miles apart. But then I never did geography well at school. But in Macau, just near Hong Kong, there's an annual conference organised by the Actuarial Society of Hong Kong there. And we've got one of their members here. I'm very pleased, Stuart Leckie, who's a long-standing ex-faculty fellow. He's here this evening, but he works in Hong Kong and is one of the key actuaries there. But in fact, it's another one of our fellows, an Institute and Faculty Fellow, Jack Mack, is currently the president of the Actuarial Society of Hong Kong. So I'd like to say hello, Jack. I said I would on the video. But Jack does a good job there and has got a very nice, personable style and gave us a very warm welcome a couple of weeks ago at this ERM conference that they were holding. So I found myself speaking on what does an actuary bring to ERM? Big growth area, we expect, one of the strategic areas of focus for the Institute and faculty. And what we did was we drew up a list of all the attributes that you need to have to be good in ERM. And then what we did was we kind of color-coded it according to whether it's covered by the actuarial syllabus or whether it's not. And those of you who are far away and can't see it, what you'll find is there's lots of green ticks for things like identifying and measuring risk, classifying and monitoring risk, scenario analysis, stress testing, extreme events, risk mitigation, economic capital. These are all things that are bread and butter to actuaries. We do that as a matter of course. But what about things like risks of the organisation as a whole, some of the strategic risks, group risk, operational risk is probably something that we've done a fair amount of quantification on. But some of the stuff about governance, culture, things like that, those are things that maybe we don't cover as much as we could. And then there are some that we actually don't really cover at all, influencing skills and the impact of your behaviour on the culture and on the sort of the development of the organisation. So one of the key issues that we then say when we're speaking to students is the importance not just of having the technical skills and not just of having professionalism of the highest standard, but actually of having softer skills, communication skills, commercial skills, these sorts of things that actually mean that you're listened to, and you can then inject the technical skills and the integrity that the organisation may well need. And so one of the issues that actuaries face today is that we're not going to have all the opportunities in business that we would like unless we can learn to be relevant to the businesses where we work and develop these softer skills. Now, many people have already done that and have had successful careers, but it's not something that is covered that well in our syllabus. We do have a communications exam, we do have a business awareness course, but there's a lot more that can be done. So this is one of the areas you'll see particular focus on within the member support and the CPD offerings that come. I suppose our analogy is a bit like you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And part of what the Institute and faculty is doing here is creating water troughs that we as members can drink from and equip ourselves to move into other areas of our careers. And that's really important. Of course, it's very easy to then think, that in fact the actuarial skill set is not as relevant as it used to be. And to me, that's flawed thinking. But an interesting example of it came just a couple of months ago in my day job. I was at a meeting of a regional actuarial society with some of our colleagues to talk about some of the exciting data analytics work that goes on now in the industry. And my colleagues gave a really interesting presentation of what different firms are doing, analysing their data and their customers, and then drawing business strategy conclusions from that to then go and direct what they do and help them prosper as a business. And in the feedback that we got afterwards, one of the actuaries present said, "But that wasn't actuarial, so why should actuaries be doing that?" Interesting question. I ended up having to answer it. And of course, the fact is, just because other people can do arithmetic doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't keep doing it. And just because other people might be able to problem solve doesn't mean to say that we've got no right to keep problem solving. Because actually, everything, even if it doesn't involve mortality stats or stochastic modelling, the actuarial mindset and skill set can travel quite far in business challenges today. And so we kind of found ourselves putting a list up here of, what do actuaries actually bring to business problems? Well, we bring all the sort of the technical skills that we know and love. But what we also bring is robust actuarial standards and integrity. You bring CPD and professionalism. We are very good at detail, but the best of us are also good at thinking big picture and drawing conclusions that help people to see the significance of data. And we've also got all the independent research, the non-commercial volunteer work that gets done to try and advance our knowledge base. So one of the key things that I'm keen to do in my year is to just remind people of how valuable our qualification is. And that if we can combine our technical skills and our professionalism with a greater interpersonal sensitivity and greater communication skills and commercial awareness, then we've got a very, very strong basis on which to move forward. Because our vision as the Institute and faculty, we've shown the mission already. I'd like to finish with the vision. And our vision is that we'll serve the public interest by ensuring that where there's uncertainty of future financial outcomes, actuaries are trusted and sought after for their valued analysis and authority. Great aspiration. We are part of the way there. We need to get all of the way there and make ourselves really relevant to the world at large. And that's partly carrying on doing what we're doing, but partly also perhaps amending our mindset in how we view our own professional body and work together and our expectations that we have of our skilled staff. But it's also about our mindset of what we're trying to do. And I'd like to finish actually by quoting a friend of mine and congratulate Catherine for joining council. At the AGM, Catherine was one of the 6 people voted on from the general constituency. But at a meeting in this hall a couple of months ago, there was a paper on modelling from the Extreme Events Working Party, and it was looking at all the tricky issues, the tricky risks to model, and some of the risks actually you can miss because models can't model everything. And we had an interesting discussion afterwards about the difficulties of modelling and some of the challenges. And then we were given a wake-up call by Catherine, who stood up and said this: "So let's not get depressed. We are the actuarial profession. We have the intellect to tackle these tricky problems, and somebody has to tackle them." We, the actuaries, are in a good place vis-à-vis models. We know the shortcomings, we can communicate, we like thinking about problems, we like improving things, and we have a public interest type of thinking. So we should seize this opportunity, start influencing government, not to make particular decisions in a political way, but to make better decisions, understanding the pros and cons, the shortcomings of the data and the model. We can do this. This paper is a major start. Let's go out and change the world. Thank you for having me as your president. I look forward to working with you, with our staff, with our volunteers, and with the other members. And I hope you'll join with me in making a start on changing the world. Thank you.